Hello and welcome back. I hope you're well. Today I have an experimental sketchbook session for you. I am going to be experimenting with acrylic markers today. I'm going to be using 4 colours, and you can see that I did an initial drawing, which is a eagle skull on the page. I'm going to be finishing off the page with you today. I'm going to be using 4 colours, and they're all from Molotow One for All acrylic markers, which are refillable, which is one of the reasons why I was interested in them compared to Posca markers, which aren't refillable. And we've got Vanilla Pastel, which is my lighter warm colour. We have Lilac Pastel, which is my lighter cool colour. Peach Pastel for a slightly darker warm, and Currant for a much darker cool colour. So we've got 2 cool and 2 warm, was the idea of this colour combo. And I'm going to be filling up this sketchbook page with a few different sketches today. Feel free to grab your sketchbook or your drawing tablet and draw along with me today. If you do, you're welcome to post it online with the hashtag drawwithmedana so that I can check it out. And I'm going to occasionally be looking at that hashtag and potentially posting things that I come across under the hashtag on these YouTube videos, or I might share them on my stories as well. And that's on TikTok and Instagram. We are starting with mushrooms, and I'm going in with a HB 0.9 mechanical pencil and then lightening it with a kneaded eraser. The reason why I'm lightening it is because if the graphite's too dark, it does show through underneath the acrylic paint. So I try to lighten it up first. And with most of the sketches I do today, I do a blocking in technique. So I go in with one colour and I block in areas of that colour. And I wait for those blocks to dry and then go in with other blocks of colour. And you can see that kind of effect on the eagle skull. For the eagle skull, I tried to do a warm versus cool, where the warms were either in direct light in the case of the pastel vanilla, or they were shadows in the case of the lilac. The peach, however, was the internal shadows, and the internal shadows in the reference I was using were really, really warm. The beak was black, so I decided to use the currant since that was the darkest value I had. And I quite like the result. It was definitely different, and it was all brought together with the line work afterwards. For all of the sketches today on this spread, I do use line work, brush pen and Micron once they're dry. And now that the initial currant wash, this isn't watercolour, block-in was dry, I went in with the lilac. And I didn't just block in, I started adding some textures, especially to the stem of the mushroom, but also the cap a little bit. And for the mushroom, I think I don't use the peach pastel at all, I just use the purples and the vanilla. It's quite a nice colour combination, in part because of purple and yellow being complementary colours, but because these are pastel shades, it's not quite as harsh and into your face as a more saturated purple and yellow combo could be. And the purple-orange combo is very Halloween-y. And again, it's not quite as harsh when it's pastel shades. I'm nearly done with the mushrooms. I think after this lilac layer, I move on to doing the next sketch while I wait for that to dry before doing ink work on it. for the next sketch. It's off screen for a little bit, but then I moved the sketchbook up again. I think it's important to allow yourself to experiment like this. I've certainly been trying to allow myself to experiment a lot more with my art. It's something that troubles a lot of artists, I've noticed, being in the art community for a little while now. And it's also something I've struggled with in the past as well. A lot of artists either fear experimenting because they fear judgment, or they fear failure because with experiments you inherently don't know what the result's going to be. It could be bad, it could be good, it could have good and bad parts to it. And if you're showing these online, like I am right now, that might be intimidating to you. It might also be intimidating because you always do sketchbook tours, or you photograph your sketchbook pages. You might not necessarily do time lapses like these, but you might take photos of the finished page and then put them on Instagram or TikTok or whatever. And you worry the entire time you're doing the spread, even if you're not filming yourself doing it, about the end result and being judged for it. And that's a very common problem I've seen among artists, especially younger artists and beginner artists. It's very intimidating, and in some cases it can make people not want to draw at all, or it makes people only draw things they know that they can already draw, and in ways they know they can already draw. With art, though, there comes a point where you realise that failure is just an inherent part of it, and it is not something to feel ashamed of. It is a massive part of growing. It is a massive part of finding what your creative voice is by finding what you vibe with and do not vibe with. Finding things that you do enjoy and things that you don't enjoy, and you only find those things by trying and doing. Even if you remove the whole aspect of getting better by tons of mileage, it's not just the improving at the physical skills itself, but also the more mental and emotional things in finding your creative voice improves with all of this mileage, and how you do the mileage as well. And it's definitely not an easy thing to just suddenly snap out of. You do have to do some soul searching, and this is different for each person, for why you feel afraid to experiment. In some cases, some artists recommend having a junk sketchbook, as some people call it, or other people call it a Safehouse sketchbook. I believe Ian McCaig calls it a Safehouse sketchbook. And that's the sketchbook that you keep and do not show to anyone. You might, when it's finished, decide that you want to show a single page, but that is a decision you make further down the line. But otherwise, it is a sketchbook that no one sees. And that is the place where you can play, you can be rough, you can study if you want to. If you don't want people to see your studies and you only want people to see your neater work, quote unquote neat work, you might want to have a rough book and then a neat book. And what is considered rough or neat is different from every person, not just at skill level, but also what you prefer as well. What is neat for one person is going to be rough for another person, and it's more a case of you're neat and you're rough. In my case, I kind of ended up with a similar thing as that, but I didn't really view it as a neat and rough book. It's more, I have my mixed media book, because I usually have 1 or 2 mixed media books on the go, and then I also have a rough book on the go. And in the case currently, I have the Nostalgie and then the Cappuccino book as my mixed media books. And the reason why I have two on the go is because the Cappuccino is a toned paper. And then for my rough books, I tend to use Art Creation. And it's not really a case of rough and neat, it's more a case of what media I use in them, and that in effect kind of makes the Art Creation ones, which I mainly use graphite in, more of a rough book, because that's where I do a lot of my studies and my thumbnails and just roughing in ideas, and a lot more sort of your scratchy graphite work is all in that book. And now I'm going in with brushwork on the mushroom. I use the Uni Pin Brush Pen, which most of you will know that I love using by this point. And I also use the 0.25mm Micron for some of the details. I pretty much do all of my inking at the moment with these two pens, especially when I'm on the go. I do use fountain pens sometimes, but I tend to use those at home. I use fountain and dip pens. You definitely can't really travel with dip pens and dipping brushes and things like that in ink. That's more of an at-home thing. A long time ago, not that long ago, but a few years ago, I used to stream on Twitch. I used to stream my drawing, and back then I did a lot of brushes dipped in ink to do my line work. And I haven't done that super recently, but it is something that I do want to get back into at some point. I do like the simplicity of my current setup, just having everything in a small pencil case that I can take everywhere with me is really nice. But there is also just something incredibly enjoyable about doing inking with brushes. It's just so... it brings me so much joy. I am definitely a process person when it comes to where I find my joy in art. I love the feel of materials. That's a massive thing for me. The feel of the paper, the feel of a pen scratching or gliding against paper. The act of drawing itself. And centering myself around what I enjoy in art has definitely been a massive help in showing more of my work online, but also in allowing myself to experiment in things like this. If I enjoyed the process, no matter what the result is, be it how good or bad, or be it how well or not well it does on social media, it doesn't matter because I enjoyed doing it. Of course, if it's your job and the way that you make all of your income, there's elements to those worries that you would have to address in other ways, but for the moment, the way that I have learnt to cope with those modern stresses is by really grounding myself on what feeds my creative soul. And for me, it's definitely process. Some people are not process enjoyers, they're results enjoyers. And even if you're a results person, you can still find grounding in that. You can look at your work over... it could either be you put away the work for a day and then you look at it tomorrow, and you look at it and be like, I really, really enjoyed the outcome of this. Or even if it's bad, you could be like, right, okay, I'm happy and proud of myself for doing it, and I've learnt a lot, and I can now go into the next drawing to do even better with what I've learnt. I think ultimately we have to just figure out what we as an individual are like and what we need as an individual. We can definitely have common ground and discuss our different viewpoints. So let me know in the comments if you're a creative. It doesn't matter if you're an artist, musician, whatever kind of creative, photographer, videographer. How do you view experimenting? Do you embrace it? Do you find it incredibly freeing and exciting to discover new ways of creating? Be them failures or successes or joys? Or do you worry about them, and why? If you worry about them, have you found ways that you cope? Do you focus on the process or being proud of yourself in the result, no matter what the result might be? Everyone's different, and there's always going to be people out there that have similar viewpoints to you. And with the final lines, we're going to be wrapping up with this page soon. I ended up doing quite a loose effect with the bird feathers as they're going further out, kind of like a vignette, because I wanted to experiment not just with flat block-ins, but also with creating texture and being loose with the mark making. So another form of experimenting today. Let me know in the comments which one you like the most out of this spread. I'm not sure which one I like, to be honest. I enjoyed doing it though. Perhaps the bird or the mushrooms. Though I do like the skull as well. I don't know. I enjoyed the spread either way. And thank you for joining me today. Thank you for drawing if you drew along. And I will see you next week. Bye.